Okay, so welcome to our first CFA Level 1 bonus class, okay? And today I will be talking through the Getting Started Guide, your study plan, and also ethics, which are the first, so there are 3 readings on ethics that we set as pre-course reading. Okay, so the methodology of the course, the idea behind this class is to get you started on the pre-course reading, which is the more factual reading, okay? So in the course itself, we cover the key concepts, the most important finance concepts that are included in the Level 1 exam. But before class, we have all of this pre-course reading, which is focused on the more factual readings in the curriculum, okay? Studies show that students who start early have a higher chance of success, okay? So this is why we're getting you started as early as possible, okay? And I'm afraid if you can hear anything in the background, it's some refurbishment happening in our office, which we did not know about, okay? So hopefully it's okay. Let me know if there is any problem and you're not able to hear me, and I will move, okay? So the course focuses on the 5 most important factors for exam preparation, which I mentioned in the Getting Started class. Hopefully everyone has watched the Getting Started class. So if you weren't able to watch it, there is a there is a recording, okay, and that's still available, so just ask me for it if you need it, okay? So what do you need? The tips for success in this exam. So everyone knows the exams are not easy, okay? If you follow these tips, you are highly likely to pass the exam, okay? Basically, resource planning. So this is about organizing your time, being focused, doing the right things at the right time, okay, and starting early. So we've got these bonus classes. We also have the class timetable and also the study plans, which you should complete. You need to think about how you're going to fit in at least 200 hours of study at home, okay? So we recommend you study for at least 300 hours in total, 100 hours in the class plus 200 hours at home, okay? So you are going to need to be disciplined to do that. Point number 2 here. You will be required to read the material before each class, so we will ask you to read the material before each class. And then join the classes, okay? Really important to join the classes, to keep the momentum going, to make sure you're hearing the input from the teachers, okay? And keeping on track. It's very difficult to catch up if you get behind, okay? Next, focus, okay? So we need to focus on the most important concepts for the exam. You need to understand very well some concepts, for example, internal rate of return, discounting to present value, capital asset pricing model. Okay, there are some concepts that you need to know very well, and so because we know they'll come up in the exam because they're so important to finance. Okay, practice. So the most highly examined concepts, we do practice questions on those in class. Okay, so that you're able to answer questions accurately, correctly on those topics. And then review. So we spend a lot of time helping students by identifying strengths and weaknesses as a result of the mock exams. So you do practice exams, we mark them, we give you reports, we tell you where you need to improve, and then we go through the exam as a whole, the whole exam, focusing on the areas where students had problems. Okay. So that's just an overview of how we support you. Okay, so about this guide. Okay, this guide covers enrollment in the exam, your study plan, down here, familiarizing yourself with study material and support, calculator tips, pre-course reading, suggested approach to the readings, and support from us, okay? Now, hopefully, I'm not sure if you have read this guide, okay? So I'm not gonna read every word with you, okay? Because this guide we sent it to you to read beforehand, but I do think it's probably be useful to just go over it to make sure that you've absorbed everything, okay? So let's move on. Hopefully everyone is enrolled in the exam. You need to be enrolled in the exam in order to get the material for study, okay? You receive ebooks automatically from CFA Institute, okay? And we actually recommend that you invest $150 to get the hard copy curriculum, okay? It arrives within a few days. I think it's a worthwhile investment personally because I myself find it easier to study from a book. I think many people do because you can see how far you've got to go, and you can highlight it. You can highlight the online books too, but it's not quite so physical. It's not so easy to find your highlights, I think. But anyway, this is a personal preference. I know probably maybe you might be more used to studying with online materials, but personally I would recommend buying the curriculum. I think it's a worthwhile investment. Okay, so get enrolled if you haven't already. Okay. Okay, the exam format. Okay, so it's 240 multiple choice questions, 120 in the morning session and 120 in the afternoon session. All the topic areas are covered in both the morning and the afternoon session. Okay. So your study plan. Okay, we recommend that you take 1 week off work before the exam for final revision. So you might want to already ask your employer about that or plan when you're going to take your vacation. Okay, you need to fit in 300 hours at least in total. Okay, 100 hours will be in the course and another 200 will be in the classroom, out at home. So, okay. So please complete the study plan if you haven't already, working out when you will fit in the number of study hours you need. Then the next thing is to look at the study material you have. Okay, so hopefully you've received the ebooks from CFA Institute. Please send questions if anything comes up, okay, while I'm talking. So hopefully everyone's managed to log in to the CFA Institute, go into the login onto the website to access your material. And you can download it on Vital Source Bookshelf. You can download the app, and then you can have the material offline as well. Okay, so that's really quite useful. The material is structured with learning outcome statements. So there are around 500 learning outcome statements. Those are the things you will be tested on in the exam. So if you know every single learning outcome statement, you will pass the exam, okay, because they will only test those. There are quite a few of them, though, so it's a fair amount of work to make sure you have mastered them. Okay. So looking at the topic areas, okay, 15% of the exam at level 1 is ethics, also at levels 2 and 3, so a very important area. We're starting with that. With the pre-course reading. Then financial reporting. Financial reporting has the biggest weight of 20% at level 1, okay? And you can see the other weights there, okay? We're going to go through briefly a little bit about each topic area. Okay, so these first, actually, the materials you get. So our students receive slide packs. You'll get those once the classes start. Study guides, which you will also get once the classes start. These study guides are to help you read the material before each class. Okay, they tell you what to focus on, the most important points, and give you a high-level overview of the topic. You get a question bank for the teaching phase, for both teaching phases. Actually, we have phase 1 and phase 2 of the teaching. Okay, so after phase 1, we have a halfway there mock exam, and then we have phase 2. Okay. And you get a bank of questions on the most highly examined topics for each teaching phase. Then you get a revision question bank with some very good revision questions that are focused on the most highly examined areas. You get halfway there and final practice exams, and a BPP book. BPP is a provider of educational materials from the UK. I studied with them. So BPP book of practice exams, and those are 3 full practice exams. Okay, so you need to make sure you plan time to do those exams. You need 1 day for each exam, plus 1 day to review each exam. So you need 2 days for each practice exam. So in total, that is 6 days. Okay, and you can decide if you're going to do those each weekend in the run-up to the exam, or if you're going to do them all in the final week or so before the exam, which is why it's a good idea to take the week off work. Okay, so you need to work out when you're going to do those. Your aim is to cover all 18 study sessions with associated practice questions. Okay, so there are 18 study sessions in the CFA reading. So your aim is to cover all of them by the end of April or the beginning of May next year. Okay, so then you have 4 to 6 weeks to go back to your weaker areas, and we have the revision course then as well, and practice mock exams before the real exam in June. Okay, 2nd of June. Is it the 3rd of June? Okay, so you will learn more effectively through repetition. So this is why we have the methodology of teaching, where you see the material for the first time, practicing, when we go back to the same material, go over it again, and then consolidation through mock exams, which is when you work on your ability to recall quickly the information. Okay, so calculator tips. okay, you are only allowed to use HP 12C or Texas BA2 Plus calculators in the exam. I actually used the Texas BA2 Plus in the exam, which is the exam that was more common when I was taking the exams in London. But I know people in Brazil generally have the HP 12C. Okay, so you need to make sure you know how to use it, okay? You know how to use it for all of the calculations that will be required for you in the exam, okay? So during the first class that we have on the 30th of January, we're going to give you tips for using your calculator, okay, and practice some of the most important calculations for the exam. So it might sound simple, some of you might be very familiar with using your calculators, but we have had people on the courses before who haven't used the HP 12C in the way that they need to for the exam, or haven't used it for a while, need to remember, and we want everyone to be really fast on their calculators. So pre-course reading, we said approximately 25 to 50 hours of reading here. So 25 is the minimum, okay? You can spend more time on the reading, which will mean you won't need to spend so much time on it later once the course has started, okay? So the more you can do now, it's an investment in time in order to make it easier for you once the course starts. Okay, so we give you some guidance on each of the topic areas as the guide continues. Okay, so ethics. Okay, so 15% of the exam. Okay, so we suggest you read the pre-course readings 1, 2, and 3 before the course starts. Okay, we're also going to talk through the readings. We're going to do some practice questions during the course, but we want you to get a head start before the course starts. Okay, so you need to, in bold here, make sure you understand the examples at the end of each standard and the subtleties of what is permitted and what is not under the standard. So that means you need to know what the standard says you should do, okay, what is allowed and what is not allowed, okay. So at the end of each standard, there are 7 standards, and this is in reading 3. There are 7 standards, and each one has some guidance, and then at the end of it, there are a whole load of examples. So you need to read those examples, because the exam questions will be similar to the examples. They give you an example, a situation, a case study, I suppose, tiny one, in the exam paper, and you have to say if the people in the example are acting in conformance or breaching the standards. Okay, so you need to know what's allowed and what's not allowed. And sometimes it's a bit grey, okay, it's not black and white, it's a bit grey. So sometimes you have to choose the best answer, okay. Sometimes all of the answers are correct, but you have to choose the best one. And that's what people often find difficult. Okay. You also need to be familiar with the 6 components of the Code of Ethics, okay, which is in reading 2, okay. And under the standards. I'm going to go through a little bit more on ethics today, okay? Okay. And there are some practice questions at the end of reading 3, which you should do, some really good practice problems, okay? And reading 3 is one of the 4 most critical readings in the whole syllabus, okay? This is the one on the standards of professional conduct, okay? Extremely important reading. So we come back to it again during the course, okay? But the more you can read now, the better. It will be easier for you once the course starts, okay? Quantitative methods, okay? So here, the pre-course work is to read through reading 6, the time value of money, and reading 7, discounted cash flow techniques. So again, these are actually very important parts of the curriculum, so we will come back to them during the course, but if you can get a head start, it will help you, okay? So here you will be using mastery of your calculator. You will be using your calculator a lot. So you will find out when you do this how good you are on your calculator, okay, and if you need a bit of extra practice to get you up to speed. Okay. Economics. Okay, so some people struggle with economics because it's quite wordy. There aren't many calculations. You need to understand the assumptions behind in the different economic models, okay. So probably there won't be very many calculations in this section. And actually, even in quantitative methods, there are fewer and fewer calculations. They are testing concepts and your understanding rather than your ability to apply a formula, okay? So it's important to understand the concepts even in numerical areas like quants. Okay. Economics especially, though, has always been like that. Okay, so we don't actually recommend any pre-course reading for this. So we do give you a study guide before the economics classes, but we actually spend quite a long time in the course going through the economic concepts to help you. Okay. Financial reporting and analysis, so we've got reading 6. Sorry, study session 6, readings 21 and 20 to 23. Okay, you should read this before the course starts if you are new to accounting in particular. Okay, so it's the basics of accounting. What are assets and liabilities and revenue and expenses? Okay, and the basic financial statements. Okay, profit and loss, balance sheet, cash flow. Okay, so statement of changes in equity. So if you are not an accountant, if you don't have any accounting background, it's important for you to read readings 21 to 23. Okay, in particular. Corporate finance, okay, reading 34 on corporate governance, that's quite an interesting topical reading, and ESG, environmental, social and governance factors. You need to know what best practice is, okay, because you will need to be able to identify it in questions, okay. You don't need any, it's factual reading, you don't need any prior knowledge. Portfolio management, okay, so read through reading 39 to understand the context of portfolio management, and reading 40 covering risk management. Okay, these two readings are quite factual. Okay, equity, right? So there's some very factual readings in equity. Okay, readings 44, 47, and 48. Basically, they are readings about different types of shares, the share markets, different stock exchanges. It's very factual reading. Equity also has a part on equity valuation, which we cover in the class, okay? But there is a bit of more information in here about what is covered in each reading. Okay, so reading 44 is an introductory section about equity markets. Okay, reading 47, how types of shares work. Okay, and reading 48, for example, it talks about preference shares, different types of preference shares. Reading 48 is about strategy. Okay, so PEST, political, economic, social, and technological analysis, and Porter's 5 forces. Okay. Maybe areas that you might have covered before in your studies. Okay, fixed income. So we don't suggest any pre-course reading for fixed income. Okay, we will be doing covering a lot of the background factual reading from readings 50 and 51 in class. Okay, so there will be pre-course reading to be pre-class reading to be done just before the class starts, or before the class starts once the course starts. But at the moment, we don't recommend any fixed income reading. Okay, derivatives, you can read reading 56, which is about derivative markets. It defines the different types of derivatives. It's quite interesting. It talks about what options are, swaps, forwards, and futures. Okay, and then alternative investments. So alternative investments is actually, it's only 4% of the exam, and there's just one reading. Okay, it's a very long reading. Okay, so we actually don't recommend you spend too long on that reading. You could spend days on it. So it's important to just get the key definitions. Have a look through the reading, see what there is. This is why partly I recommend also having the hard copy books, because you can flick through it more easily, okay, to try and get a scope, the whole scope of the reading, the perspective, the high-level overview, which you can see just by how many pages there are, how many sections, just by flicking through. It's harder to do that when you have the electronic material. Okay, but make a start on that if you are able to. Okay, we don't spend much time on it in class. We have just in the teaching phase of the course, we just have one class on alternative investments. Some people are quite interested in this area. I personally find it quite interesting. So you might want to spend a bit more time on it, but if you do that, make sure it's not at the expense of other areas which have a higher weight in the exam. Okay. So we have a list here of what you should be focusing on. Okay, and we actually have 3 critical readings. Okay, these are extremely important for the exam. So the ethics reading 3, which was the one on guidance for the standards of professional conduct, standards 1 to 7, and then time value of money and discounted cash flow. Okay, so we will come back to that in the course, but we want you to get a head start on it. Okay, so you can see here we've got, well, these are the study sessions. This is the reading number. This is the importance of the reading, and this is the title of the reading. Then we've got the suggested total number of hours you will spend on that reading during the whole course, and then the suggested number of hours of pre-course reading. Okay, and then the bonus class, which is the classes we're doing now, just to keep you on track, to give you the personal contact to answer any questions. Okay, so I think this is important because I think what tends to happen is, you know, if you don't have the classes and someone kind of talking to you, what can happen is you just don't really get any reading done. So I want everyone to be arriving to the first class having already done this pre-course reading. Okay, so then you're all going to be in a good position and you're going to be far more likely to pass in the exam. Okay, so really very important to do this reading. Okay. So the pre-course reading hours, as you can see, they total 25. Okay, in total during the whole course, you will do around 52 hours of reading on these readings, these particular ones. So it's up to you if you want to do more time now, which will make your life easier later on. Okay. The more you do now, the more likely you are to pass the exam. Okay. If you find you're taking too long to get through the readings, apply the 80% rule. This is a really important tip. Okay, you do not need to know everything. You just need to know 80% of the reading. The most important content in the reading, you need to master the learning outcome statements. LOS, right? Use the learning outcome statements to help you focus. Okay, because there is a lot of detail in the readings. You don't actually need it all. Just focus on the learning outcome statements. So keep them in mind as you're reading and keep looking back at them. Think, okay, does this relate to the learning outcome statement? Is this helping me with the learning outcome statement? Okay, because they are your driver. The learning outcome statements are that's what you need to know. Okay, it's the guide for you to focus. Okay, all about focus on the learning outcome statements. Do not spend hours and hours and hours reading everything. You really don't need to. You just need to focus on those learning outcome statements. Okay. So how do we recommend you approach the reading? So look at the learning outcome statements. Okay. Work through the reading. And again, you do not need to read everything. Focus on achieving the learning outcome statements. Okay. Now it could be that you have a quick look through the reading, and then so answer the questions at the end of the reading within 24 hours of completing the reading. Okay, because we forget things. The only way for us to remember these things is to do practice questions. If you find you cannot get the questions right, you need to go back to the reading. Okay. So it's a kind of repetitive process. So you read. If you find when you test your understanding is not good enough, then you need to go back to the reading. Okay. So you go backwards and forwards a bit. Okay. It is better to do that than to spend hours and hours and hours of reading without testing your knowledge. Okay, you need to do the practice questions within 24 hours of reading the material. So read a section, do some practice questions. Read a section, do some practice questions. You must do the practice questions. That is really the most important thing. It is a complete waste of time to read and not do practice questions because you are going to be tested on the questions. Okay. And then regarding note-taking, I would not take too many notes. Okay, there is a danger of rewriting the curriculum, which is long. So do not take too many notes. Only make notes of things you really find very difficult to remember. Okay, so have a list of things that you need to learn. Okay, things you find difficult to remember, maybe some formulae. Okay, but do not try to take too many notes. You need to have this knowledge in your head, not on paper. Okay, some people learn by taking notes. Okay, now you have to do what's going to work for you. Okay, but just be careful about not taking too many notes. Okay, so it's just a little warning. Yes, take some notes, but try to minimize the notes because you don't want to have all your knowledge on paper. You want to have it in your head, and you get it in your head by doing practice questions. Okay. I sometimes do learn by taking notes, and what I do, but I'm not learning because I'm reading the notes later. I'm not taking the notes to read them later. I'm taking the notes to make sure the knowledge goes through my brain. So I read it and I write, but I write in a way that's not for reading later. It's just for it to come through my brain. So just be careful, is all I'm saying. Do not take notes. so that you can refer back to them later, because the knowledge needs to be in your head. Okay, notes only should be for things that are very difficult to remember and you need to learn. Okay, so I suggest you have one list of things that are difficult to learn. You just keep adding to it. Difficult for you to remember. You just keep adding it to it. Okay, and you use that list as review it every now and again, and you will use it nearer the exam to review to make sure you've learnt everything. I try to identify what is important in the passage of text if you're going to make notes, okay, and make the notes quickly. So using abbreviations, symbols, tables, showing relationships, drawing diagrams, etc. Try to interact with the material as much as possible. Okay, so what support will you get from us? So you can send us questions, CFA level 1, CFA1 at shptraining.com. Okay, I'm always available, so just to help you. I mean, I might not be able to answer straight away, but just send me any questions you have. Okay, and don't worry. Okay, we've all done the CFA exams, the tutor team. Okay, so we're here to help. We've been there. We know how to help you, and you know, it's just a case of following the tips that we gave you at the beginning about discipline, about study planning, resource planning, watching the classes, okay, making sure you do the pre-course reading, etc. Okay. So any questions so far? So Juan Paulo, do you have any questions? Yeah. Okay. So a lot of content in the ethics. Good. All right. So yes, thanks for the question. So João, here we go. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of ethics to help you navigate it better. Okay. So it actually covers readings 1 to 5 on ethics, 15% of the exam. Okay. The pre-course reading is just on readings 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So let's look what we've got. So we've got first ethics and trust. This is actually it was a new reading in 2017. So it really, this particular reading explains why ethics is so important, because the investment profession relies on trust to work. An investor has to, or a client has to trust their advisor in order for them to go ahead with an investment, etc. Trust is extremely important. So that's what this reading is focused on. It's not too long. I actually don't think there are any practice questions at the end of that reading. So it should not take too long to read this reading, okay? Reading 2, Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. This is a good reading to give you an overview. It has the Code of Ethics in it, which has 6 components. And it also has a list of all the standards of professional conduct, okay? There are 7 of those, and it just lists them to give you an overview. It lists them with each, there are so there are 7 standards, and there are subcategories in each standard, so it gives you an overview. Then reading 3 is a long reading, okay, and this is one of the most critical, the 4 most critical readings in the curriculum, and that gives you a whole load of guidance for standards 1 to 7. So it lists each standard, it goes through each standard, it gives you the guidance, what you should do regarding each standard, and then it gives you example situations, okay, and in the example situations it tells you what behavior is acceptable and what is not. So what behavior is permitted by the standard and what is not. And those examples are very useful for the exam, because in the exam they will give you situations and you need to say if the people in the situations are complying with the standards or not. Okay, and at the end of this reading there are, I think, 40 practice questions which are really important for the exam. Okay, so you need to make sure you do those, and any that you get wrong, mark them for you to come back to them later to make sure you're getting them right. So if you get any questions wrong, you need to understand why you're getting them wrong, and then you need to go back to them later and make sure you're getting them right. Okay. Reading 4 is Introduction to the Global Investment Performance Standards. So why do we leave that to the course? Because in the course, we'll go through it with you without you wasting too much time going through all the details. You don't need to know too many details. You just need a good overview. Okay. And the GIPS standards themselves, so here we go, even more detail, which is actually covered at level 3. Okay, so you don't need to know as much here, really, as you do at level 3. You might get 1 or 2 questions on GIPS, and there are certain things that they tend to test, which we will go through in the class. So the pre-course reading doesn't include these. Okay, there are other things that are more useful for you to do in the pre-course reading, okay, which is this. And study tips. There is no shortcut. Okay, so you are going to have to read everything. It is a lot of reading, which is why we set it as pre-course reading. Okay. You should be fully familiar with the 6 components of the Code of Ethics, and you should have read each of the standards, okay, and all of the examples at the end of each standard. So the examples are key to understanding the examples. They explain the subtle difference between what is permissible, what is allowed, and what is not. It is subtle, okay? So with travel expenses, for example, there are some situations where it is okay for an analyst to receive reimbursement from the company they are covering, the company they are writing about, for travel expenses, okay, in some situations. Basically, when there is no commercial travel available. So if they need to get a private jet to go and visit a field somewhere, that is allowable if there's no other way for them to get there. So the company that they are analyzing can pay for them to do that, okay? There are some rules regarding gifts as well, what's allowed, what isn't allowed, you need to be familiar with. So in the second class in the course, I think it's the second class, it might be in one of the first classes in the course, we cover ethics, and we go through some important things that people often get confused about, okay, about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. But before that, we would like you to read the standards and be familiar with them, okay? So ethics in a nutshell, we've got ethics and trust, which was the first reading. Then the Code of Ethics, okay? You need to know the 6 sentences in the Code of Ethics. This is a summary, okay? It's to help you identify them, because what they might do in a question is list 3 things that might be in the Code of Ethics, and you have to identify which one is or which one isn't. Okay, so these are the key words. Act with integrity. Put the interest of clients above yours. Put the client first. We need to have independent professional judgment. Okay, we have to not be biased. We have to practice and encourage other people to practice in compliance or in accordance with the Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. We need to promote integrity and viability of the global capital markets for the ultimate benefit of society. Okay, so we're actually helping society by being ethical, by promoting integrity and viability, integrity. That's what makes the global capital markets viable. That actually relates quite a lot to this trust thing. Okay, and strive to maintain and improve competence. Okay, about competence in the investment profession, people knowing what to do, people having technical knowledge. Okay. Then we've got reading 3, which was understanding the standard of professional conduct. So you need to see situations that are in the examples and know what you should do. Okay, so travel expense situations, you need to know what the analyst is allowed to do. Okay. It could be that you get questions with more than one standard. Okay, so you need to know the difference between the standards and see the big picture as well. It's not common sense, okay? You need to study and practice a lot of exercises, okay? This is where you will learn, by doing practice questions exercises. And then GIPS, which is actually readings 4 and 5, okay? It's about memorization, but it's simple, it's not difficult, okay? And we cover that in class. So this is just an overview of the standards. We've got professionalism, okay, which is about professional conduct, which is about not getting drunk, for example, when you're at work, but not just that. So it's that, and then also having the competence to do your work, okay, behaving in a professional way. Integrity of capital markets, that's about not manipulating markets. You have duties to clients, being loyal to your client. You have duties to your employers, being loyal to your employers. There are some guidelines regarding the analysis you should do for investments, the recommendations and actions you should take. Okay, there are some guidance regarding conflicts of interest, what you can, what you can't do, what you need to disclose. And then you have responsibilities as a CFA Institute member or candidate. So there are some rules that you need to follow. There are some ways that you are allowed to refer to your candidacy in the CFA program. For example, you can only say you're a candidate if you're actually signed up for the exam. You're not allowed to use an acronym that you, for example, C.F.A. You have to say CFA. When you're a CFA charter holder, you say I'm a CFA charter holder, not I'm a CFA. So they're quite strict about that. Okay, and there are some things you might be tested on in there. So that's an overview of ethics. Okay, to make it more manageable for you. Okay. Any any other questions on ethics? I don't want to get into the details yet. Okay. If you have any detailed questions, let me know. Okay. And send to me by email or WhatsApp. Okay.
Okay.
Soon, actually, we're going to create a WhatsApp group for CFA students. Okay, so you can send questions in there as well if you want, like a screenshot of the question and what your problem with it is, and then we'll help you. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Was that helpful? That overview?
Yeah, it was helpful. So I'm going through the etiquette, and I'm still tired because there's a lot of content. By the way, I have to read and practice. So welcome to CFA exam.
Exactly. Well, you knew, right, before. So, but it's good. So it's really important. You know, you can say. Actually, one of our students, he's an investment advisor, and from a year or so ago. But he includes a link to the standards of professional conduct in his email signature, because it's really important for him to show clients that he complies with these ethics, and they have been translated into Portuguese, the standards of professional conduct. So I could, if you're interested, I could send that link to you, but I just think it's quite interesting that it helps him with his business to show that he complies with the standards of professional conduct of CFA Institute. So it's, I think, very worthwhile investing some time in all of this, actually. But yes, it does. Don't spend too long, particularly on reading 3, okay? Because you need to move on to the next readings for the next class, okay? Which are quants readings and financial reporting and analysis for class 2. So you need to plan your time already, okay? We're having 1 class a month approximately, okay? And there's a fair amount of reading to do for each class. So this is where the classes really help to keep you on track, okay? So do what you can on ethics, but remember that in class 2, we're going to look at quants and financial reporting and analysis. Okay.
Okay.
So, have you had a look at your study plan?
Sure. So I am trying to study each day 2 hours, around 2 hours per day, and during on Saturday and Sundays I'm trying to study 6 to 7, but it's a little bit harder during the weekends.
Yeah.
But
Well, so we suggested just I mean, this is good. So you're doing about 7 hours per week. So in your plan, you're going to have 7 each week here, right?
yeah.
Course reading, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. This is good. And so how long do you think you've spent on the ethics readings so far?
On ethics, around 12 to 14. A lot of content, because I'm trying to memorize, but it's hard. It's hard to memorize. I have to get the concepts.
Yes. So I wouldn't suggest you try to memorize. What I would suggest you do is practice questions. Have you done the practice questions?
Yeah, and I downloaded the app that I have a lot of questions.
Great.
It helped me.
Yeah. So that should help. So it should help you learn. You should learn by doing the practice questions. Are you finding you are, or?
Oh, I found, but I have to finish the standard 7 to start my question. But I will follow what you said. After I finish, I read. I go and do some practicing.
Yeah.
Questions and back.
Exactly.
I start to do this.
Yeah, I think it will help you, because the problem is if you spend like 14 hours reading and don't do practice questions in that. So for example, I don't know, if you read some ethics and then you wait a week, you're probably going to forget everything you read. So you need to do the practice questions within 24 hours. Okay. So yeah, for it to stay in your head. That's probably maybe why you're finding it difficult to remember. Okay. And it's funny how the human brain forgets things. So,
yeah.
Especially if it's completely new. Okay. If it's not completely new, then you might have a higher chance of remembering. But it probably is completely new, because I mean, this is not. It's like I said, it's not common sense. It's you really do need to study it. Okay. But I'm glad you've got some practice questions. You've downloaded this app, and what app is it you're using?
Which app?
Which app? Yeah, is it this one, the CFA one? There's a CFA one as well.
It's called CFA Level 1.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, so they have questions on each topic. So
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Always best to do the CFA Institute practice questions because they're written by the CFA Institute, the examiners. So yeah, good. All right, it sounds like you're on track then. Just make sure you're doing the practice questions within 24 hours of each of reading. So you can read, finish reading Standard 7 and then do some practice questions and then move on to the readings in quants and financial reporting before our class on the 21st of October.
Okay.
Okay, sound good?
Okay.
All right, João. Well, congratulations on your dedication so far. Okay.
Yes, I have to dedicate.
Yeah.
But it's not so. I prefer another topic than ethics. I usually don't like read about laws and something like that.
Yeah.
But I have to learn. So.
Yes. Well, do that. I mean, you're not alone. Many people don't like ethics. And then, don't worry because ethics. I mean, ethics is 15% of the exam. The rest of the exam is probably going to be more the kind of thing you like.
Yeah.
So more numbers and Although it's about concepts a lot, but not ethical concepts. I mean, so quantitative methods you need to understand about discounting, and financial reporting you need to understand about financial statements, and the differences between US GAAP and IFRS. Corporate finance, I don't know how you'll feel about doing the corporate finance reading. It's about corporate governance. That's maybe sort of similar to ethics. It's about what you're allowed to do, what you aren't allowed to do, what's best practice. Portfolio management, I think, is quite interesting. Equity is interesting too. Derivatives, don't know how. Have you done derivatives before? Have you studied derivatives?
If I studied derivatives, just options.
Okay, so
But
yeah.
in the practice way, I buy some calls or buy some puts to do a hedge in my personal portfolio. But
all right, well, so that's good because that's a good start. Then we also cover in derivatives swaps, futures and forwards. Okay, and then alternatives, we'd look at private equity, hedge funds, real estate, commodities, and infrastructure. Okay. So there's a lot actually in alternatives, but it's only 4% of the exam. So anyway, I already mentioned that. Okay. So any other questions before we wrap up today?
Oh no, to me it's okay. I going to. So I have another question. So after answer some questions, my score is and my average is between 70 to 60. It's not 80%. What's your goal to be
Well, so when it comes to doing the practice exams, we tell students to aim. We want you guys to aim for 70% in the practice exams. So with the practice questions that you're doing now, you should aim to get them all right, okay? Ideally, but I mean, like I said, the ones you get wrong, try to understand why you got them wrong. That's the most important thing. You need to be learning from doing the questions. So why did you get them wrong? Was it because you didn't understand the content? Was it because you hadn't read the content, you didn't know it? Or was it because you misread the question? Try to understand why you got it wrong, and then do them again, maybe a week later, or even 2 weeks later. But go back to them, do them again to make sure you get them right. It's an iterative process. Keep going back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you should so with ethics, so another good tip for ethics actually is not to do all of the ethics reading at the same time. So what you could do is start reading the quantitative methods readings and then do maybe 1 hour of ethics each time you sit down to study.
Okay.
So, mix the studying up a bit. It helps you retain the knowledge better. and it stops you getting bored as well.
Yeah. Okay, I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
I will try to do this. I will send you about my scores, how it's increased.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep in touch.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my average, my study time is okay, 2 hours per day during the week and 6 to 7 during the weekends.
Yeah, that's
enough.
quite a lot. I mean, I'm not saying. I mean, good. That's good. Do that as long as you think you can maintain that rhythm. That's good.
Okay. Okay.
When I was studying, I used to study on Saturdays for about 8 hours every Saturday.
Okay.
With breaks, you know. You need to, I mean, that sounds good as long as it's not making you tired, because you have to look after your health as well. Okay?
Okay.
Because you don't want to get sick, yeah? So look after your health, make sure you're getting enough sleep, you're eating well, all that stuff is important too. Because this is kind of like a marathon, you know, so it's, you've got to be healthy.
Okay.
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 So that would be my tip, all right?
All right, teacher.
Healthy and happy, okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay. So yeah, and please send me any questions you have as you're working.
No, that's okay for me. Okay.
All
Great,
right.
thanks.
Okay, thanks, João Paulo. Have a nice weekend, okay? And
You too.
see you soon on the 21st, okay?
Okay.
If not before.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, teacher. Thanks.